right, guys, welcome to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm your host, Charlie McGrath. It is the 22nd day of November, Friday, the anniversary of the assassination, the murder of JFK. I know most of the folks listening to me on the Rinse Radio Network understand that the official story is just that, the official story, and there's a lot more to it. But coming up here in just a minute, I'm going to bring on a guy who is going to blow your mind. With the things that were happening behind the scenes that led up to the assassination, the murder of JFK. So if you're listening and you're not in the chat room, a lot of you are not used to us having a live program on Friday. This is only the second weekend that we've had it in a row in the last couple months. So if you're listening and not in the chat room, get into the chat room at wideawakenews.com. You can get in there now and post questions in there for Michael. Our guest, Michael Thomas, who's coming up here in just a minute. I'll also be putting this up on YouTube later. So if you're listening and you want to share this information, and you're probably going to want to, then please download or the link for the YouTube video, which will be up later, and share this with as many people as you can. Hunt 1803 in chat asked me to go on a rant. I'm not going to do that tonight, mainly because we have a lot of information to cover, and just this short hour to do it. Brett is going to I believe we're going to only have one break tonight, so we're going to get as much of this information in as we can. So let's get right to it. Brett just sent me a message, and I'm breaking up a little bit. Michael, hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Charlie.
All right, let me give you a quick introduction first before I turn you loose. And guys, I've talked to Michael before. He's going to deliver a lot of information, very powerful information in a hurry. So, as you're used to hearing Lindsey Williams interviewed, get your pencil ready because there's a lot of stuff you're going to learn tonight. Michael Thomas is a contributing writer, one of the main writers at stateofthenation.com. Not only that, his articles and that site's articles have been all over the internet, up at Rants, Wide Awake News, Lou Rockwell, just all over the internet this past week, and tons and tons of good information. Really, it's becoming, Michael, the cornerstone. This information that you put together in just this one article I have in front of me, Warren Commission report, the most absurd investigation in history. This is really the foundation. If somebody wanted to see the foundation for what happened with the JFK presidency, this article is it. I commend you on your work.
Thank you, Charlie. And I think it's not just the foundation on the JFK assassination and subsequent follow-up. It's kind of like a foundation for what has proceeded with regard to the building of the New World Order. So, this is, JFK was a foundational president in terms of a president that really assumed his post to wake all of us up. And in doing so, he laid the groundwork for all of us baby boomers and the beatniks that came before us. He really shined the light on all of the dark spaces, all the crevices, under all the rocks that where all this construction of the New World Order was going on out of sight back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And before we get into the assassination and what led up to it, there's going to be a lot of people that think that he's was just a typical politician, come from a corrupt family. You have, and I know you can't get too deep in it, but you have personal knowledge of that being not the case. Yes, nobody's perfect, and yes, there's some shady things in everybody's family history, let's say. But looking at what his intent was and the things that led to his assassination, he was really somebody that was trying to expose this New World Order, correct?
Charlie, there's absolutely no question about that. Politics is a tough place, as we know, and getting elected at the level of presidency is no easy task. And his father, because of who his father was, Joseph Kennedy, ex-ambassador to Great Britain during pre-World War II days, 38 to 40, appointed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's clear that his father knew the ins and outs of the political world enough where he could get his son elected. And you and I talked once. He was on a mission to get his eldest son, Joe Kennedy Jr., elected.
Right.
And when Joe was shot down in World War II, it fell to John Kennedy's shoulders, and John Kennedy was really cut from a different bolt of cloth. So I think what happened was Joe Kennedy was so determined to get a son elected to the President of the United States, first Roman Catholic in U.S. history, that they pulled out every stop to make sure he got elected. And once he got there, I think John Kennedy, being the very genuine idealist that he was, he just left the reservation, and they really didn't plan on John Kennedy leaving the reservation the way he did.
Well, in leaving the reservation, do you think any of that had to do with, his father Joe, who was dumped as ambassador to Great Britain? I mean, do you think he knew he was going to use that office as a platform to expose corruption, expose this New World Order agenda?
It's a good question, Charlie, and that's the one that sort of haunts me the most in my analysis of this whole situation, and just retrospectively looking at what happened, why did it happen, and when did it happen. It's tough to know what was going on in the mind of JFK prior to his assumption of the presidency. It's just almost impossible. However, the second he got in the presidency and he saw the control matrix that he had to operate within, there's no question that every single day he was in that job, he got smarter and smarter, and he saw what was going on, tutored by his father. Father, let's face it, was right in the thick of it for World War II. No one was as deep into World War II as his father was, so he knew all of the motivations, the different national interests, what was going on in Germany, in Britain, in the U.S., so he knew the inside stories, all of them. And so, it may very well be that once he got into the presidency and he saw that there was a real design, a more, nefarious design behind this whole New World Order, that from that day forward that he assumed the reins of power, that he made it a mission to exercise that power in a way that would simply do one thing, and that was expose the plan, the hidden plan, which is essentially what he did.
Well, no doubt about it. He, and as you have talked earlier, it really is a shame that some of his goals. If his goal was to be a president who exposed the New World Order, there's certainly proof that he did just that. But it goes to show the nefarious nature of this New World Order, to bury and to smear and to hide and to lie and to in your face boldly commit sloppy crime and yet push it off as fact, as we saw with Kennedy and Oswald, as you had mentioned off air, as they did with 9/11. It's complete and total. We don't care what you think, but we will show you what happens when you step outside of this New World Order construct.
That's exactly right, Charlie. So let's face it. What you say is perfectly representative of what JFK did, and there is no greater act of revelation than availing himself. I mean, literally, he knew he was told before the assassination. He knew if it didn't happen in Dallas, it was coming down the pike, and he knew it, and he knew he couldn't stop it. He knew that, and so, in a sense, availing himself to an assassination, he may not have known it was going to be such a barbaric public assassination, but he knew it was coming, and by availing himself, that was the greatest revelation of all. I mean, good God, assassinating a president in broad daylight in such a violent way and doing it so in your face that, hey, the New World Order is basically saying to the body politic, not only can we do this, but we can do it anytime, anywhere, any way we want. We will get away with it, and as you just said, we can be sloppy about it, transparently sloppy about it, and that's the power that we exercise around the world. So people of the world, you can't do anything about it. Just sit there. You're powerless. You're in a hopeless situation as far as our running of the New World Order is, and all you can do is grin and bear it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I want to jump into this because I made a quick promo video letting people know we were going to cover 10 things that we're going to try. We're going to try our best to cover all 10 things. Well, it isn't just 10, but we're going to try to cover the 10 that are in this article that I'm referencing tonight that ended up getting JFK killed. Now, the first one I absolutely know about, and if somebody walked up to me on the street and said, who Kennedy, and I would say Executive Order 11110 got him killed. So let's get into this a little bit. JFK in June of 1963 issued Executive Order quadruple 11-0, which was going to create $4.3 trillion of money, of notes through the Treasury rather than the Federal Reserve. This had to be one of the primary reasons. I mean, you don't need any other 9. This here is messing with the New World's Order financial system, plain and simple.
There's no question about that, Charlie. And I think on the Internet, if you were to Google, Executive Order 11110, you would find more research and more references to this executive order, more than any other concrete reason as to why JFK was publicly executed. That this was, you don't mess with the bankers, you don't mess with their money. This is because this is the very nature of the control matrix. It's really a global economic and financial control matrix. That's the prison that we all live in, honestly. We're indentured servants. It's debt slavery, whether it's credit card, whether it's your mortgage, whether it's taxes, whether it's all the myriad ways in which we are kept within this financial prison. And it's not just the almighty dollar. It goes beyond the almighty dollar. It goes to every currency, every form of barter in the world is intensely controlled by one focal point, one power structure. And so when Kennedy stepped off the reservation in this way to say, we're going to re-empower the U.S. Treasury to print its own money, which it has the constitutional right to do. But basically, he's just basically taking back the power that the Treasury had in the first place. And yet, for doing that, that was breaking their most important law, and they would not let him get away with it, because if they did, then any other nation, okay, I mean, there's 200 nations in the world, and if the U.S. does it, let's face it, sets a very bad example for the rest of the nations in the world, and they would follow suit to the extent that they wanted to take their power back as well.
Yeah, and look at the result since then, right? I mean, look at the result from June of '63 when he signed 11110. What was it? Just a few months after his assassination, it was null and void, right? Exactly.
They effectively. Now, there's a lot of commentary on the Internet that it really wasn't effectively nullified, believe it or not, until Reagan's term. Now, that may or may not be true. It's very murky. However, with Johnson coming into office, effectively they shut down the silver certificates. Within months, silver certificates were taken out of circulation. There were no more printed. So the practical effect was that regardless of when the actual when his executive order was repealed, they still effectively shut down the process of printing silver certificates. I remember I used to collect them. I was a coin collector, avid coin collector. And I remember collecting the silver certificates, and all of a sudden one day they were just gone. And all silver, as you know, was all hard silver was slowly taken out of the money supply as well.
That's
so
right.
It all goes to taking the substantive backing away from U.S. money that was effectively sealed under Richard Nixon in 1973, when basically the U.S. dollar was completely taken off the gold standard. So
yeah, no doubt about it.
So we agree that number one is that's it. Number two, though, Charlie, as we go into these 10 reasons, and this is just 10, as you and I have talked about, there's another 10 behind these 10, and then there's another 10 behind those 10. But these 10, when you start getting into them, you say, well, which one got him killed? Well, number two, CIA. I mean, Kennedy vowed to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds, quote unquote. I mean, how do you do that and get away with it? So the point I'm making is what he did with the CIA. I mean, it wasn't a failed Bay of Pigs operation. It was a pull the plug on the Bay of Pigs operation, and JFK is the one who literally pulled the plug on it to make sure that it was not successful. the CIA was fuming at what they considered to be a betrayal. It wasn't a betrayal. Kennedy was conned into doing it in the first place, and
right.
buffaloed and maneuvered and manipulated into even going in that direction. And when he got wise as to what they were doing, he just basically pulled the Air Force support and made sure that it was going to be a disaster, which it was. So
yeah, and no doubt, and since then, again, looking at what has happened, since the assassination of Kennedy, the black budgets. What we just learned a few days ago that there's $8+ trillion that are just non-accounted for. That one must assume is tied up in black budgets in things like CIA, NSA, and the list goes on. So, very, very powerful, unconstitutional ruling from the Shadows organization that certainly would have been motivated to take this guy out.
Exactly. And by the way, in this whole process, what does he do? But he fires CIA Director Allen Dulles. I mean, Allen Dulles was, we're talking about one of the biggest power brokers, not in the country, in the world. I mean, in terms of the world shadow government, Allen Dulles was as inside man as you'll find. You don't fire Allen Dulles as CIA director. You just don't do that. So, right. And 2 or 3 of his lieutenants who were equally as hidden and powerful guys in the world shadow government. So, the long and short of it is, what was more serious, the disempowering of the Fed or the disempowering of the CIA? That's number 2. And then we go to number 3. Number 3, a Vietnam War and JFK again, basically conned by his generals and his security advisors that weren't a part of his team. These are the guys that were part of, we'll call them the Council on Foreign Relations team, right?
Right.
So that team, not his team, but the CFR team. So they're all ginning up the war in Vietnam, and he's like, well, what's this thing all about? And they're working behind his back, just literally mucking it up over in Saigon and Vietnam, and just basically actively fomenting a war. And he's sitting here, again, scratching his head, what's going on here? And when he realized what was going on, he immediately reversed course. He and his brother, they both reversed course and said, okay, this war has to stop. And he said about the process of stopping that war. So here again, you've got the world shadow government that is using this war for 5 different reasons, very purposeful. And JFK goes right up against the agenda of the Vietnam War and does so in a way that, he undermined and sabotaged and did everything he could to work around their initiatives to gin it up, which ultimately really exploded with later on with LBJ using the Gulf of Tonkin false flag event to really gin it up. But that's what they were trying to maneuver Kennedy into doing, and he just wouldn't go there.
In fact, he had issued a directive to what I think it was 1964 or 65. He wanted, by that time, he had wanted a drawdown of troops or of advisors rather at that time in Vietnam by 1,000. Certainly setting the stage to back out of that. I find it interesting that this same posse of New World Order elite and these globalists who were dead set against him pulling out of the Vietnam War. If we look at events since that time, if you look at it this way, look at Vietnam War and forward, everything is this murky, shadowy prosecution of war that has no beginning and has no middle and it has no end. It has no way to quantify victory or failure, and it lasts continuously. It just keeps going on and on and on. It really feeds the New World Order's agenda. It feeds the military-industrial complex and the security-industrial complex, which JFK warned us about. So you can see that line. There's so many things that were started and finished, right, with JFK. When he was assassinated, everything that we're talking about tonight, virtually everything that we're going to talk about tonight, you can mark it in history as a changing point. We don't fight wars the same way. We don't even talk about money in the same way. We don't talk intelligence and surveillance, and we don't talk about the overreach of government the same way we do since the murder of JFK, do we?
Those are all excellent points. Excellent points, Charlie. It was a defining moment in American history. And it was because of what he brought to light. Let's face it, there was no president in American history that shine the light of awareness on so many different issues. Look at the ones we're talking about right now. The next one being Israel's plan to develop nuclear weapons. Well,
number 4, yeah.
Who basically controls the Middle East? What state right now literally controls the entire narrative within a region of the world and the entire Middle East? It is Israel, and the reason why they're able to do that is because of this sort of hidden, furtive understanding that they may or may not possess nuclear weaponry. I mean, good God! I mean, here you got a rogue state, basically a rogue state, criminal nation that has nuclear weapons and holds that threat over 15, 20 other nations that make up the Middle East narrative.
Right.
I mean, so JFK knew this. He knew what the whole ratification by the UN of the Israeli state was all about. He knew that Israel was set up to do one thing, and that was to run interference. It was just America's proxy in the Middle East to be the bully and make sure that our foreign policy was dictated at the point of a gun, and they were the gun, and their nuclear weaponry was the threat. So the point is that he went right up against Ben-Gurion, Prime Minister of Israel back then, and let me tell you, that shouting match still isn't over. Okay,
and I didn't realize the depth of that until I read your article, and I'm a little bit curious because it said a lot of this stuff is still classified, right? That the conversations that they had, because Ben-Gurion certainly was trying to establish justification and reasoning to become a nuclear power, one of the largest on Earth right now, and Kennedy was dead set against it. Is there anything that has come out of that or leaked out of that that can shed light on the relationship between them?
Well, the key, I would say the key issue was that JFK was absolutely dead. Well, first of all, JFK saw what America did to Japan in World War II. So it started with his understanding that this is now a real peacemaker who sees nuclear arms and nuclear weaponry as being the bane of human existence. So just take Israel out of the picture for a moment. Honestly, I believe that it could be any nation, not just a rogue nation like Israel, but a good nation like Botswana. And Kennedy would have. I'm trying to be very fair and objective here for a moment, Charlie. I think Kennedy would have reacted the same way to any nation's request because of how repugnant he found nuclear weaponry being used, especially the way we used it against the civilian population in Japan. I mean, you can be sure he was horrified that we did that. And so the thing with Ben-Gurion was not personal. Of course, the Israelis and Ben-Gurion love to make it personal. I mean, they're experts at taking stuff personally. But with Kennedy, I mean, you could tell. I mean, I did a lot of research of the dialogue and different incidents that happened, and you could see that Kennedy was very objective and detached about it. It's like, look, you aren't getting this. You're not getting it on my watch. Maybe after me, but not on my watch. And he was so strong that the Israelis they simply couldn't believe what they termed, Kennedy's arrogance around it. That Kennedy was just being honest about it and frank, straightforward. And they couldn't take that honesty.
Yeah. Well, that whole nuclear-armed Middle East, which is Israel, I mean, that could occupy an entire hour. I do want to make a quick announcement. It's 31 minutes after the hour. We are not taking this first break. We will have one coming up in 10 minutes at 41 after the hour. So I'm going to keep driving on because the fifth one, and I just put into the chat room that number 5. That one's a head scratcher to me. I had absolutely no clue that this was true. Although I don't doubt anything you have in this story. Reading it several times now. JFK, UFO, the releasing of information that we're not alone. Didn't even know this was on the table. Break this down. Number 5.
Okay, so we all know that JFK. Let's face it, JFK launched the American journey into space. So he was a dreamer. He was an idealist. He was a real journeyman, so to speak. I mean, in the most idealistic, philosophical, and cosmic way, we'll say. I mean, so he put us into space. I mean, he really ginned up the American NASA machine and got us going into space. So he was focused not just here in world politics, but he was focused out there. In his focus of examining all things outside of the earthly realm, first of all, he was the President of the United States, and he was briefed on things that happened at Roswell, many things that happened that he was directly aware of, he was made personally aware of events where he knew that there was alien contact made with this country, previous governments. And so, because he's kind of an innocent guy, almost a naive, childlike guy, that once he was made aware of it, Charlie, I'm just kind of looking into his psyche now for a minute. I think he was the kind of guy that once he was made aware of something, I think his attitude was, well, if this is the truth, why shouldn't we share this with the American people? In other words, don't we respect and don't we honor the intellect, the maturity of the American people to handle information so profound, so earth-shattering as something that, hey, we share the universe with another presence? And so his mission was to reveal that, because he felt that was a very, very significant. It was a standard operating procedure of the U.S. government. I mean, there was all kinds of contact that was made, especially within the Eisenhower administration. He was privy to that, made privy to that, and so I think his attitude was, we need to trust the American people that they can handle this information and let them deal with it the way they can deal with it. But you and I both know that revelation, that simple revelation, would have completely blown apart not just the world shadow government control matrix, because let's face it, if they're out there, then the world shadow government isn't so all-powerful anymore. They're not so big and so almighty, because there's something bigger. They're called alien civilizations that live in other parts of the solar system, other parts of the galaxy, and so it's such a paradigm exploding concept that the world shadow government simply would not. I mean, look at it, it's 2013. I mean, how many years later, 50 years later, how closer are we still to that kind of revelation being made in the mainstream media? So
no doubt about it. If that, I mean, that is world changing, right? If that information came out, Michael, come on, that changes the game on every aspect, every level, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's so earth shattering, so paradigm exploding that it's simply put, the world shadow government, that's their big secret. It's the dirty little secret for the past 6,000 years. We're here alone, and we are the kings. We run the place. There's no one above us. We're all powerful, and this is, if there was something bigger and badder than they are, then it's like they'd be the gods. It's not the kings and queens and monarchies of the earth that are the gods. Right. There's something much bigger than them.
Now, the challenge is the construct. It challenges the world, the reality that is built for us all to, toil in, right?
And it especially blows apart all the religious myths and all the legends. Just take Christianity. I mean, up until now, within churchianity or within institutional Christianity, there's no room for UFOs and aliens and strange extraterrestrial civilizations. There's no place for that in traditional Christianity.
I find it interesting that at this time, so many years later, decades later, the Catholic Church is starting to soften its stance on the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It could be because maybe they wanted to get this control grid in place, get technology developed before they or reverse engineer or whatever the case may be before they revealed, before they felt we were ready. This revelation, who knows?
That's a very good point, Charlie. That's a very recent development, as you know, under
yes.
Pope Benedict. He's the first one that at the Vatican for the first time made those kinds of revelations. And by the way, it is 50 years later, and by the way, it's 50 years closer to where they know we are going. So those revelations only came out because they know that they have to. That's the only reason why they came out. And of course, that's the topic of another conversation. But as things evolve over the next 5, 10, 15 years, those Vatican revelations will come into very, very stark contrast. We'll have a very good understanding as to why they came out with that information exactly when they did. So,
no doubt about it. Let's jump to number 6.
Well, again, Charlie, when you look at number 6, again, we're comparing these to each other. I don't mean to preempt you, but think about it. Look what we've talked about already. Now, you're a president, and you issue a public declaration about and against the secret societies of America and of the world.
Right.
Now, we're comparing these and saying, okay, which one did them in? Well, now the secret societies, they're the bulwark of the world shadow government. They're the brick and mortar. Everything runs the way it runs in the background because of them. And this guy comes out at a major press conference, speaking to the journalists of the world, and issues them basically issues them a threat. Under his watch, their history. I mean, does it get any more serious than that?
No, and in fact, you could encompass everything that we've talked about 1 through 6 to this point, and cover them really with being under that umbrella of secret society. I mean, it is the motivating force behind everything we've talked about tonight, and obviously, I mean, it's fairly obvious. I think the listeners of this program and people who open their eyes and are awake, that secret society is the shadow government. It is what happens behind the doors. It is what happens to push legislation. It is what happens to push us into war. Secret societies that he saw and warned us about killed him. That's simple.
It doesn't get any more when you. I mean, the only other president that I'm aware of course, FDR made some oblique references to it that were quite telling, and there's no question about that. But the only other president that was really out there with it, as you know, was Woodrow Wilson. And I mean, he made that, his one famous quote. You know that one famous quote by Woodrow Wilson where he basically talks about a power that's so hidden, so powerful, so scary, that even the highest men in commerce and business and politics are afraid to speak above their breath about it. And I'm paraphrasing him, obviously.
Right. And you know what's interesting? You know what's interesting about that? Because I read that in the article, and Wilson, it was his tenure that we got the Federal Reserve. And at the end of his life, he admitted, paraphrasing as you just were, that was one of the largest. He was quoted as saying it was one of the most horrible things that happened to him in his life. The biggest regret he had in his life is the usurpation of our financial system to the secret society, basically.
Listen, Woodrow, what you just said, Woodrow Wilson, to a great extent, mimics the JFK type of scenario. Woodrow Wilson was pulled out of Princeton, president of Princeton, and they interviewed him. Idealistic guy, naive guy, and they put him in the presidency. And he didn't want to go to World War I. He didn't want to see a lot of this stuff happen. But he had Colonel House in his group there that was just basically manipulating him 24/7. And it was all. I mean, he was the New World Order plant right in his house, literally right in the White House. And so, if you look at Woodrow Wilson, his whole administration, what happened was very instructive for what was to come. And just like Kennedy, though, every day he learned. And the more he learned, the more he came out and made statements just like this one, where he was basically, revealing to the world, hey, something's not right. I don't know how I got here, but I'm here. And, don't judge me so harshly because there's a power so strong and so, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We have to take this break. And we'll pick up a comparison between Woodrow Wilson and Kennedy on the backside of this, and then jump into 7 through 10. We might actually be able to touch on all 10 of these. We're going to be back here in just a minute with Michael Thomas, investigative journalist Michael Thomas, and more Wide Awake News Radio. Please hang tight.
What if you could shift into a parallel universe right now and be the solution to any problem you're facing? I'm Matthew David Hurtado, CEO of RNA Drops and author of Misfit to Millions, based on my true life story. 4 years ago, I was dying with Lyme's disease, PTSD, and virtually homeless. ION and the RNA drops gave me a new life, new DNA, and the power to become a millionaire in just a few short years. I want to pay that forward to you. Get a copy of my book, Misfit to Millions, and I'll give you a free bottle of RNA drops, the product that changed my life. I've got $199 in free bonus gifts for the first 200 people that go to misfittomillions.com and get a copy of my book now. Go to misfittomillions.com. That's MISFITTO millions.com. What would you be, do, and have if you knew you couldn't fail? Take the plunge now. Go to misfittomillions.com.
Charlie McGrath of WideAwakeNews.com here with a question from my friends at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion. What do they know that we don't? Insiders and a who's who list of elite have made it crystal clear that we are headed for catastrophe, putting out warning after warning, urging people to batten down the hatches. Billionaire George Soros has recently been dumping stocks and at the same time acquiring millions in gold. In fact, in a recent interview, he was quoted as saying, "I'm not here to cheer you up. The situation is as serious and difficult as I've experienced in my career." Out of control government deficit spending and a Federal Reserve that's only solution seems to be print more fiat currency will lead to a weaker dollar and massive inflation on necessity items such as energy and food. If you have wealth to protect, please visit my friends at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion. Gabe Elton and the folks at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion have many Wide Awake News customers because they're honest, they're fair, and they won't sell you paper promises or product they do not have. Call Gabe Elton at 800-552-4109. That number again, 800-552-4109, or visit them online at austincoins.com.
Make a promise, take a vow, trust your feelings, it's easy now. Understand the voice within and feel a change already beginning. Oh, won't you tell me again?
Welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. Charlie McGrath, joined by Michael Thomas, investigative journalist, contributing writer, one of the main writers at stateofthenation.com. Is there any other sites you want to give out, or I don't know how else to give you to promote you, Michael? I really want to make sure we do that because
we have many sites that we write, but that's our main one for purposes that we're topics that we're covering tonight. I just have to say you trailed off there right before the break, Charlie, by interestingly saying that we would talk more about Kennedy and Wilson, and
right.
we've never done this before. We've never written it, or we've written about it, but we've never really analyzed it as deeply as we are tonight in public. And let me just mention something to you. It's 2013. It's the 50th anniversary of JFK. 63, we know what happened then. Well, guess what? In 1913, 50 years before 1963, Woodrow Wilson writes, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." Now, the point is, I mean, you talk about, synchronicity here, 50 years apart exactly. And so there is really a lot of similarities between the evolution of the presidencies from naivete to being wise. And there's a lot more we won't talk about tonight, but there's so much that happened in the Wilson presidency that goaded the U.S. into World War I, that got the Federal Reserve up and going. So much had happened there behind the scenes that people are unaware of. That maybe another interview will talk about that. But
yeah, no, it is very interesting. And then later in his life that he let a lot of this information out. But in your opinion, I mean, JFK gave his life, or at least he committed to exposing the things that he did, knowing full well the end result was going to be an attempt on his life or his life being taken. And it seems, if you look at history, Woodrow Wilson, there's a lot of things that happened that we're still paying the price for that happened under his watch. So goaded, yes, absolutely, but he capitulated to where Kennedy at least seemed to stand up for it. Is my perspective wrong? Stand up for his beliefs, rather. Is my perspective wrong on that?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I would respond by, 63 was a lot different than 13. I was ticked off at Wilson for many years because of exactly what you're saying. I was really, and I started reading about things that he was subjected to. And, you think JFK was in a bubble. Can you imagine back in 13 the bubble that they could keep people in? There's a lot of stuff that happened to Wilson that no one knows about. He was sick. He was in bed for, I think, 18 months while president. No one could get to him but his wife, because his wife knew what was going on. And they literally cocooned him. No one could get to him. The presidency was run by his wife practically. And it was the result of somebody trying to assassinate him, by the way. And this has never come out. But the point I'm making is that he, to be a little more sympathetic to Wilson, as angry as I am about the Federal Reserve and World War I, he was not as wise, world-wise as Kennedy. Not nearly. Mm-hmm. He was an academician. He was an Ivory Tower, Princeton president. He didn't have any of the political savvy. They just railroaded him. And so I think he was so green and so wet behind the ears that they simply took advantage of his inexperience and just railroaded him right and left, got away with it, and he didn't even know what was happening. I really, to a great degree. And then when he found out, then he started to do stuff, and of course, at a certain point, it was too late. It was all done, and so. But I know what you're saying, Charlie.
Yeah, it's easy to have animosity. It's easy to have animosity looking at things that happened during his tenure as president, especially looking back, at people like Andrew Jackson who stood up, and made it their life's mission to defeat the banking cabal.
Yeah, of course, Jackson was a completely different animal. There, that guy was set up for war. He was going to take the bank down. I think on his tombstone it says, "I broke the bank." So Andrew Jackson was cut from a completely different bolt of cloth. But it's a very good point you make, Charlie. Just talking about little warfare here. We're comparing these different 10 major reasons that got Kennedy assassinated, and you look at what Bobby Kennedy did as Attorney General in literally inaugurating an unprecedented war on organized crime, in taking on the New York City and Chicago mob families head on. So now you're going to looking at another piece of the new world, the world shadow government that uses. The mafia is used by the world shadow government to execute its order. Literally, figuratively, and literally to execute its orders. So this is for those wondering, we drifted to number 7, JFK brother and U.S. Attorney General going after the mafia, and you could see, right? I read Contra. You can see heroin, CIA connection. You can see how organized crime, quote organized crime, is used as a way to not only fund but, as you said, kill, to enforce a new world agenda. Exactly. So Bobby, when Bobby did that, and Bobby, he said it to his family. He said it publicly that he often held himself directly responsible for his brother's death because he was so aggressive. And it's not so much that he was aggressive; it's just that nobody ever took on. You just didn't take on organized crime. Here we are, Americans, knowing that organized crime is alive and well in your backyard, and it's just the status quo. This is just the way it is. Well, the Kennedy brothers said, no, this isn't the way it should be. This is the frame of reference that we're born into. This is the context that we've inherited, but it's not the way it should be. Again, they're idealistic, and you can hear the idealism in their words, the way they spoke. And by the way, this kind of idealism, when you're putting it into effect against something as powerful and pervasive as organized crime, where is that going to get you? So again, another reason, but reason, but what's going to take out John Kennedy? And by the way, eventually Robert Kennedy.
Exactly. Number 8 we have listed, and I'm just looking at the clock, and I'm not going to rush through these. If we get through the last few, we will. If not, we'll do it another time. But 8, I'm going to glance over only because we've covered it with the CIA connection, the Cuban Missile Crisis, that period of time, and I really want to get to 9 because it's another perspective that I didn't have until I read some of your work, which was J&K's involvement with civil rights.
Yeah, well, let's face it. We're talking about the Civil War take two here. I mean, since the Civil War, let's face it, the civil rights were never really enjoyed by the minority black population of this country, and both JFK and his brother took up that mission very, very heartfully and courageously. And by doing so, especially in the Deep South, they were going up against an institution that just like Lincoln was going up against the institution of the Deep South. I mean, it was still woven into the fabric of Southern culture. Different bathrooms, different restaurants. Well, and again, it was terrible. It was awful, and it shouldn't have happened. But JFK, made it his mission to right that wrong once and for all. And again, you're going to a very deep core of cultural sensibilities that it's not north against south or right against wrong, or it's just it's just people's misguided prejudices, and so that arouses. Again, he was killed in Dallas, in the South.
Right.
He was killed in the South, in Dallas, and so that's no accident that was set up in the South. The sentiments of Southern law enforcement and the sentiments of the people were much easier to corral against him in the South, and so I think to a great extent,
and a lot easier to set the stage for a single shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald patsy.
Yeah, and use all of use the machinery, the political machinery, the law enforcement machinery,
right.
All of the machinery that has to be put into motion to make sure that the cover-up, because it's the cover-up that matters. I mean, pulling a trigger, that's nothing. It's the 50 years of nonstop cover-up. Now, that takes time. And, people listening to this saying, Charlie,
that takes talent.
How many times have you heard, Charlie, how could they possibly have engineered a cover-up so expansive, so intricate,
right.
So complex and convoluted for so many years? Who could do that? Who's got that power? Well, guess what? It doesn't take any power. If a great majority of the people in the power structure want him gone, it's like, Charlie, I come from corporate world originally, and the CEO of the corporation, all the world shadow government has to do is control the CEO of ExxonMobil.
Sure.
Okay, so if they've got 400,000 employees, all they've got to do is control that president CEO. Once they control him, which they do through golden parachutes, golden handcuffs, massive stock options, they control him. All he does is issue directives to all the vice presidents and all the way down to the lowest level.
And he sets the tenor and the tone of the corporation, and he sets the agenda, and people are lemmings. We train kids that come out of school now to be good little cube bots, so they can go into their cubes and do exactly what they're told. About a minute left. I do want to hit number 10 because it covers some of the one or two of the questions that came in about. One of them was George H.W. Bush, the Bush family, their connection. Number 10 you have on this in this article is very, very powerful enemies that amassed against JFK. Go ahead and elaborate on that a little bit, and probably take us right to the end of the program.
Yeah, well, I think in those individuals, I mean, whether it was the Texas Mafia that LBJ was associated with, or again he beat Richard Nixon for the presidency. Nixon wasn't happy about that. Hoover obviously was a tyrant who ran the FBI, and he wasn't going to take orders from this new president of the bloc. You've got Allen Dulles, who he fired from the CIA. You got George H.W. Bush, who was an eventual CIA director, very connected with all of these different groups. They're all natural friends. All of these groups are natural. They tend to be very conservative, more hard-nosed Republican, and they were natural friends. And in JFK, they found a very natural enemy. So it was quite simple for them to lock horns, and just roll over. I mean, especially using Dallas as their platform. I mean, they had the place hardwired, and all of them, by the way, were cogs of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and their agenda was a perpetual war economy. Kennedy bumped up against that, and you've got it.
And the result is he is done. And again, look at his assassination as a milestone in U.S. history and see how things have developed. You know, it goes 1 through 10 in these with these reads that we can see turning points in under all these issues. So very, very fascinating stuff. Michael Thomas, contributing writer, one of the main writers over at State of the Nation. You can see this article at wideawakenews.com as well as many other sites. But if you want to read it in depth, you can read the entire 20 pages. Wideawakenews.com on the right-hand side. Michael, thank you very much for your time and your effort and your lifelong study of this topic and bringing it to our attention on this anniversary of JFK's death. Thank you very much.
It's been our pleasure, Charlie. Thanks an awful lot for having us on the program.
You are very welcome. We'll get you back on. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back Monday with live programming. Have a good weekend. Peace.
The human body healthy and strong. Now, you can give your body and your immune system a mega boost of disease-fighting oxygen with all-natural Oxy-C. With so many people now leading a sedentary indoor lifestyle, most are in a chronic state of oxygen deprivation, which sets up a perfect environment for disease, general fatigue, and a host of other symptoms. Oxy-C is yours in simple, convenient capsules. Nothing to mix, nothing to hassle with. Take it with juice or water anytime. Feel a cold or flu approaching? Have no energy or spark anymore? Try all-natural Oxy-C and prepare to be amazed. Oxy-C is only available from New Earth Health Solutions at Rense.com. Look for the New Earth banner at Rense.com.
In 2007, one man, Mike Dillard, made 5 predictions which forecasted the 2008 economic crisis and the pending Eurozone collapse. 3 brand new, shocking, must-watch videos with predictions for the coming year. www.the3videos.com. Over the past year, Mike Dillard has helped thousands of ordinary people create and recover wealth by tapping into the black box investing strategies the big banks don't want you to know about. www.the3videos.com. As the European banking system implodes and governments collapse at breakneck speeds, the next 12 months will be the most anticipated and important months in modern human history. This will make 2008 look like a walk in the park. Everyone will be affected. Go to www.the3videos.com now. Learn how to prepare your family and prosper during the global financial collapse.
You're listening to the Rense Radio Network, nationwide and worldwide on the net and at Rense.com.
IRN USA